What actually is ChatGPT, and how does it work? How do the prompts generated by ChatGPT display themselves in a manner that seems so human-like? Well, ChatGPT is a little bit like a function, with an input and an output. It takes your input and creates a whole paragraph by predicting the word someone might say next. It does this by using thousands of vector multiplication functions in an array at extreme speeds. It is trained like a toddler, starting with random values, and is fine-tuned through a method of giving a score to how accurate one of its predictions is. This training allows it to produce the most accurate result it can with what it knows. It uses hundreds of millions of words from every corner of the internet, however, is only trained on the internet. This means that it can struggle to replicate human emotion and can often be biased and spew incorrect information. It doesn't think like we do and isn't nearly as intelligent as us. ChatGPT 4.0 has over 1.7 trillion parameters. This can be compared to the amount of synapses a human has, which exceeds 100 trillion. We can't understand these bubbles, but we can break them down into what they really are: a simple neural network. A neural network is like a function, with inputs and outputs. However, this function is very complex, with many different inputs, outputs, and parameters that are able to be tweaked. This specific one I have drawn here doesn't do anything of importance, but is a good example to learn the parts of a neural network. The neurons are connected through a weighted connection, which is like the strength of a connection in your brain, and each neuron has a bias, which is similar to the chance of the neuron firing in your brain. In a neural network, there is an input layer, the middle layers, which are sometimes known as the hidden layers, and then output layers. This neural network has 7 neurons with 18 parameters that can be changed to result in something different. The actual math behind a neural network like this one is quite complex for what it looks like. Neural networks often use linear vector multiplication because it is very optimized in many programming languages. You don't need to understand how the math works, but you do need to understand how this connects to the network. This column is the initial values in these first neurons. Then, these get multiplied by the weights, and then the outputs of each multiplication are added up with the bias. This is just for the first 2 layers. To do the final one, you just use this equation again, but with these values of the weights, these as the input, and these as the bias. Neural networks like these learn through a method called backpropagation. Backpropagation is an algorithm used to determine the best weights and biases for a neural network to output the result you want with the highest accuracy. It does this by nudging them up or down depending on if a value output by neurons and their connections was correct and close to what we want, or not accurate or correct. LLM stands for Large Language Model. LLMs are AI models that use text to interact with the user. They kind of work like autocorrect. They work by taking the prompt you give it and predicting what should be said next based on a percentage it gives to the possible next words. This result then gets fed back into the LLM with what the AI said and what you wrote before. It doesn't always pick the top answer either. Sometimes it picks less probable answers to sound more natural. This is why you get a different result whenever you put a prompt into ChatGPT, even if it's the same prompt. These LLMs are trained on thousands of gigabytes of data. They are trained first through backpropagation, which I described earlier. However, after this first round of training, humans go through and select which prompts are good and which ones are bad. This is called reinforcement learning from human feedback. This, at first, is done by ChatGPT getting a prompt, generating 4 to 9 responses, which are then ranked by a human from best to worst, based on a few factors, like how similar to a human they sound. If you've ever gotten a response while using ChatGPT where it asks which one is better and gives you 2 responses, you're actually helping and changing the LLM that ChatGPT uses to make it more accurate.